Hey YouTube, petey twofinger here. Harry Nilsson was working on an album when he passed away. He tried to, he went into RCA or whatever, and they just didn't get it, and he ended up walking out. It says here, November 22nd, Omnivore Recordings will release Lost and Found, which will feature Nilsson's final recordings with a production polish by Hudson and some of the late singer's friends, including Van Dyke Parks, Jimmy Webb, and drummer Jim Keltner. Keith Nilsson, who was 8 when his father died, will add bass to the album. So this is Harry Nilsson. There's a movie. Who is Harry Nilsson, and why in the world is everyone talking about him? He's the guy that did this thing called Everybody's Talking. He did Without You. I can't live if living is without you. He did Everybody's Talking at Me. They did this Beatles interview and they said, "What's your favorite band?" And they said, "Nilsson." And Paul McCartney said, "Nilsson." Yeah, they both, John and Paul, answered Nilsson. And then they got a hold of him. They got a hold of Harry Nilsson, and they said, "Yeah, we should do something together sometime." And they bought him a flat, like an apartment, and he flew out to London. I think he stayed there for a short time. I know that 2 big time musicians died in Harry Nilsson's flat. Mama Cass supposedly choked on a ham sandwich there, and Keith Moon the Loon, the drummer from The Who, died of an overdose of hemeverin, which is a sleep aid, and champagne. So, forgot all of that rock and roll lore. He's an incredible talent, vocal talent. He's a tenor that has a 3.5 octave range. Just God said, well, this guy's not going to have a very great life, but he's going to make the world a lot better place through his music, through this golden voice that he was given. Harry Nilsson was just one of these people that was really charismatic and could sing and wrote these wonderful songs, but he was also just a dirtbag guy. He was a horrible alcoholic, cocaine addict, and people talked about him. If he showed up at your door, you knew you wouldn't be coming back for a week. Like, he was just unbelievable. Cocaine and alcohol. He was John Lennon's drinking buddy when Yoko kicked John Lennon to the curb, and he had this Lost Weekend, which was a year, and he went from New York to L.A., and that's who he was with. Yoko sent Kyoko. Kyoko was another girl, younger, better looking than Yoko, and she said, "Go with him, go ahead, and he's yours," basically. So Lennon was with her, but he was also just kind of. There was this legendary thing where he put a Kotex on his head and got kicked out of a Smothers Brothers show at a bar called the Troubadour, which they had this Hollywood Vampires Club, and that was Keith Moon, Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees, Alice Cooper, Harry Nilsson. Did I say Keith Moon? Who else? I think John Lennon was a member. But pretty much that was this upstairs section of this bar where I said enough about the Hollywood lore. Nilsson forgot about all those stories, although that's really interesting and the movie's great. If you're not a Nilsson fan, you should check it out. He's got some great music. Now this isn't all wound up guitar stuff. He's got orchestral albums. He's got albums where it's just him on a piano. Nilsson sings Newman. Little Touch of Schmilson in the Night. That's an orchestral album with him doing standards and classics. He was unable to keep an audience because every time he came out with something, it was completely different. It was like, now he's doing tropical music.
Oh, Lime in the Coconut.
Lime in the Coconut. One is The Loneliest Number, another song that Harry Nilsson is known for.
The Courtship of Eddie's Father theme, if people are old enough to know that.
Courtship of Eddie's Father was a television show, but basically he started out kind of a Beatle clone, and he's got this circus type album called Pandemonium Shadow Show, Pandemonium Aerial Ballet. I think that's a pair of albums, kind of like Pink Floyd. And as he went on, he hit a peak with Son of Schmilson and Nilsson Schmilson. Okay, this thing with his name, they kept giving him a stage name, Johnny Rocket. Then they kept wanting to eliminate letters from it. So there was all these different spellings of his name. So he played on that. And he had an album called Nilsson Schmilson, and then an album called Son of Schmilson. Those are the best two. If you don't know who he is, get a copy of Nilsson Schmilson, get a copy of Son of Schmilson. That's the vampire one where he's got the fake teeth. Also, this album he did with Lennon is really good. It's called Pussycats. It came out in '74. He blew his voice out. They were drinking brandy Alexanders and doing coke, like fiends. And he messed up his voice. Supposedly they had these screaming contests in the studio where he was coughing up blood, and you can hear it. His the production on that album, it really isn't great if you listen to it, but it's there's some really, really great music on there. Really good stuff. I really like The Point. There's another thing he did, which was an animated thing. So there's a lot there. If you're not a Harry Nilsson fan, The Point is really cool. That's an album that he wrote when he was under the influence of LSD, and he came up with this concept for that, The Point. And this is the music that I grew up on, and it's really high quality stuff. My dad loved Nilsson because Nilsson was a Swede. If it was Swedish, then it meant it was good. Anything else was bad. American goofs. Maybe if you were German, you got a break. But yeah, it was one of those things where my mom tolerated it, I guess, because anything else was like kind of the devil, kind of like not tolerable. But she put up with Nilsson because the music is beautiful. And he does, like on Son of Schmilson, there's You're Breaking My Heart, Fuck You. That's, one of the songs. And he's got, what's the guy's name? Peter Frampton on guitar. I think George Harrison might. He recorded with all of the Beatles except for Paul. And he was really good friends with Ringo and John. He had a whole thing with Ringo. They did a movie together that's just awful. Something called
Dracula or something, right?
Son of Dracula, I think it's called. But yeah, if you haven't heard of Nilsson, it's nothing like the Beatles. He always gets pigeonholed as, he was the Beatle guy. He was the sixth Beatle or whatever. No, he's not. His music is nothing like the Beatles. The Beatles wish that they could sing like Nilsson. He did stuff with recording, with multi-track recording, that was, he was kind of, do I say, a pioneer in like the way that he used the studio. And his thing was that he never performed live. So he didn't have to worry about multi-tracking all this vocal stuff. And just like creating, there's an emotional depth in Harry Nilsson's music that you will not find. That's one way to put it. There's very few artists that can really channel this emotion like, man, this is really sad, like heartbreak stuff. And that's what Nilsson's all about. Now, there is beauty in melancholy, but like I said, it was what I grew up on. And that, this is really way too heavy stuff for a kid. And then, of course, I lost my father at a young age. I was 15, basically 16. It was 9 days before my 16th birthday when we lost my father. And then it was very difficult. It was impossible. I couldn't listen to Nilsson for many years because it was too emotional. And then, time heals. And I was able to, go back to it. There was a whole, rehashing of Nilsson in the 90s. They did a tribute album called For the Love of Harry, Everyone Sings Nilsson. And then there was a massive box set that came out. And then with the internet, all these recordings started surfacing. So we're going to be seeing a whole bunch more of that. New Nilsson stuff's coming out on November 22nd of 2019. So I'm very excited about that. I'm definitely going to be picking that up. And like I said, like they say in the movie, you say Harry Nilsson and people are either who or their eyes light up and they know about this guy. And that's the thing, the people that know about him are rabid fans because there really wasn't anybody like Nilsson. He is an incredible artist, and literally anything that you pick up, it's all really good. And this is some really respectable music. It's not cheap rock and roll. This isn't Def Leppard. This isn't hip hop. It's like he's got an orchestra, and when you hear him sing, you understand he deserves to have the orchestra there. Like he's got this gift. Nobody could sing like that guy. Absolutely incredible. Forgot the fact that he's Swedish. Forget that. There's nothing to do with it. All right, you guys. Peace.